Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are tearing up the old rule book on how organizations manage knowledge. For decades, when people talked about knowledge management KM, they meant something.
Well,
Something pretty sterile and static.
exactly. It was kind of the digital filing cabinet era. KOM was, for the most part, a bureaucratic exercise. It was focused almost exclusively on collecting, classifying, and then just stuffing data into these vast repositories that, often nobody even read.
Right. The goal was storage, not application.
Not at all.
But our source material makes it really clear that we are witnessing a profound mutation in this field. It's driven by necessity and it's enabled by technology. We're moving toward what's being called Organization 2.0.
And that essential shift is driven by the Web 2.0 model, which, it relies on participatory intelligence. The goal is no longer just holding information. It's about breaking down those rigid management silos and actively connecting people in these fluid networks to mobilize collective knowledge across the entire enterprise.
This sounds great in theory, but it feels like it requires a fundamental rewiring of management philosophy. So our mission today is clear. We need to unpack the tools, the cultural principles, and the specific structures like networks of knowledge and communities of practice that you need to implement this new net-centric style of management.
Okay, let's jump right in by addressing the absolute foundation of Organization 2.0. Because without this one single element, the whole structure doesn't just stall, it becomes like digital vaporware. That foundation is trust.
Yeah, what our sources call confiance, and this is really the central blocker that we've inherited from the traditional industrial model. That old model, born in the manufacturing age, was brilliantly optimized for division of labor and managing measurable costs.
Things like inventory or timesheets, things you can count.
Exactly, things you can count in real time, but knowledge mobilization it's messy.
It is. It's nearly impossible to quantify the value of an insight or a piece of shared expertise right when it happens. You only really see the value of that shared knowledge a posteriori, months or even years later in things like sales growth or faster development cycles.
And this creates a huge management failure, right? Because managers, they fixate on what they can measure easily, so they chase intellectual capital, patents, brands, formalized processes.
All the stuff you can put on a balance sheet. But they largely ignore the central living value of social capital.
And social capital is what, exactly?
It's the quality of the relationships, the living links between people, and the willingness of those links to actually carry valuable information. If you don't have strong social capital, all the patents in the world won't save you.
It's interesting how our sources define trust in this context. They call it the optimistic acceptance of a vulnerable situation in which the one giving trust believes the object of their trust will look after their best interests.
That definition is just crucial because the vulnerable situation is the act of sharing. When you share unique knowledge, you potentially lose your professional monopoly on that skill. You make yourself vulnerable.
And that's the rub, isn't it? Sharing knowledge is fundamentally an act of free will. Technology can record and store digitized content all day long, but if that interpersonal trust isn't there, people will hoard their expertise.
Oh, absolutely. They'll wait to be paid for it or wait until they're gone to leave it in some document rather than sharing it proactively when it's needed.
So the manager might invest millions in the latest collaboration software.
But knowledge circulation depends entirely on the degree of trust that's built into the culture. If you need a memorable contrast to all this, just look at Semco.
Semco, right, the famous Brazilian company known for its radical democracy.
Radical is definitely the right word. They operate without long-term budgets, without a formal mission statement, and famously without traditional job descriptions. The CEO plays an effaced role. They intentionally step back from being the central decision maker.
That seems like it would just be chaos. How does an organization like that even function without a clear hierarchy telling people what to do?
Because extreme transparency and radical collaboration are the infrastructure. For instance, 2 board seats are reserved for any employee who just volunteers. They get it. They understand that trust isn't a soft, nice-to-have skill. It's an absolute engineering requirement for them.
Okay, so we've established trust as the foundation. Now let's shift from the attitude to the actual structure. Modern economies are hyper-competitive, demanding permanent innovation and rapid adaptation.
And that pressure is really the engine pushing organizations to become less hierarchical, more self-organized, and fundamentally more networked.
And to understand the power of true networking, Our sources point us outside the corporate world. They look directly to the military, specifically the U.S. Navy in this concept of network-centric operations, or
Right,
NCOs.
pioneered by thinkers like Alberts and Hayes.
Mhm.
And NCO's core principle is self-synchronization. Imagine units in the field. Instead of waiting for a slow top-down command from headquarters,
Which could take minutes or hours.
exactly, every unit acts autonomously based on shared, high-quality, real-time information. They synchronize their actions because everyone is looking at the same high-resolution picture of what's happening.
So the chain of command's role is completely flipped on its head. It stops being the central dispatcher of orders.
It does. The central command post moves from transmitting original orders to issuing counter orders. They only step in when they have a crucial piece of information that the forward unit hasn't seen yet. They have to trust the competence of the subordinate units.
That contrast is so clear in a logistics analogy. In the old industrial chain model, decision-making is centralized, so only the logistics center learns from errors, and adaptability is incredibly low.
If the plan breaks, everyone just waits for the center to fix it. But in the network model, all the information about stock, needs, failures is shared across the entire web.
So decision-making gets pushed to the edge.
Pushed to the edge. If one distribution point runs dry, any other point can see that need and intervene immediately. Everyone learns together, which makes adaptation lightning fast.
This fundamentally changes the manager's role then. The shift is from monitoring metrics and compliance to command, which is more about influence and ensuring clarity.
A net-centric manager's main responsibility is making sure their subordinates understand what they are doing, not just being told what they must do. It's a subtle but crucial distinction, and it requires a profound commitment to letting go and trusting.
And if you doubt for a second that networking is a core corporate asset now, there's this incredible anecdote from the sources. It's about a major Silicon Valley venture capitalist firm who got a really compelling business plan from a promising CEO.
But here's the kicker. The decision not to even meet with him wasn't based on the financials or the market analysis. It was heavily influenced by the CEO's poor digital signature on LinkedIn. He only had 32 connections.
32 connections. In today's world, a dense social network is seen as a hard indicator of social capital and influence. It can actually override classic indicators like diplomas or even a spotless bank account.
It just demonstrates that your ability to connect, to mobilize resources, your living network,
Yeah.
that is now viewed as a financial asset.
Yeah.
It directly impacts your perceived ability to succeed.
So if social capital is the engine and network-centric management is the chassis, what are the components that actually hold this whole knowledge structure together?
Well, that brings us to the social dynamics of it all. Informal networks are great. They're open and unbound. But to get to a higher sustained level of communication, to move beyond just swapping information to, say, shared thinking and ethics, they have to formalize into actual communities with shared boundaries and rules.
And the most important structure for this, for professional knowledge sharing, is the community of practice, the COP.
Precisely. Etienne Wenger defines a COP as a group of people in similar professional activities who meet specifically to learn from each other and to advance their shared profession. This structure just arises naturally because the division of labor often isolates people who do the exact same job but on different projects.
Right. The COP brings them back together. And Wenger identified 3 core elements. We should slow down here because these are essential. First, the domain is shared interest. That's the why.
Yes. Everyone has to understand the stakes. The problem they're trying to solve has to be real and important to all the members.
And second is the community itself, the interaction and relationship building, which creates that mutual aid and, critically, the trust you need for sharing.
And finally, there's the practice. This is where the rubber hits the road. It includes the shared tools, the common vocabulary, the experiences, everything that collectively builds common knowledge. This is the how.
So the practice element is critical because that's where the shared language and standardized procedures actually emerge, allowing people to collaborate across, say, the globe.
Absolutely. The collaboration requires a common language, and often that language doesn't exist yet, especially across different plants or global regions.
Our sources give a few major types, from communities of interest all the way up to communities of innovation, citing the open source developers of Linux as a top-tier example.
And here is the aha moment that just illustrates this perfectly. The jargon barrier. There's a brilliant anecdote about the galvanization COP at the steel company Arcelor.
This was a community focused on improving how they galvanized metal.
Yes. And when they first brought together experts from different plants around the world, they couldn't even start discussing solutions. The very first task they had to tackle was creating a trilingual dictionary, French, English, and Spanish, just so they could all agree on a common vocabulary for their tools.
Wow. So that effort, as tedious as it sounds, was actually the foundation for any real collaboration.
It was the fundamental prerequisite.
Okay, now let's piece all this together into the overall structure of the post-industrial organization. If we're building Organization 2.0, our sources describe this triptych model, the three necessary pillars of the networked enterprise.
Right. These three pillars coexist, and importantly, they reinforce each other, but they serve different purposes. First, you still need the functional hierarchy. It allocates resources, maintains the long-term strategy that doesn't just disappear.
Then you have the project teams. They're the producers, the people actually making the money.
And critically, you have the communities, COPs, which develop the collective knowledge and learning capacity that the project teams desperately need to succeed.
I can see a challenge here, though. Doesn't this triptych model risk just creating three new silos? A hierarchy silo, a project silo, and a COPS silo?
That is the risk if management just tries to bolt COPs onto the side of the existing structure. The key is understanding the dynamic flow of it all. The hierarchy gives legitimacy and resources, but the dynamic is inverse when it comes to generating ideas.
Explain that inverse flow.
The COPs generate the expertise and the ideas. Those ideas feed into temporary project teams, which organize themselves around those innovations. And then the chief executive, or the hierarchy, simply legitimizes and funds the process that's already formed. The energy flows up from the communities, not down from a strategy document.
And this whole structure is really empowered by Web 2.0 tools. Technology finally caught up.
It really did. Things like wikis, blogs, RSS feeds, they made sophisticated collaboration technology cheap and widely accessible. This enabled the publish and process mode, which separates the act of publishing from the act of subscribing.
Which means information flow is more personalized and timely without some central filing clerk.
Exactly. But to make this collaboration stick, you have to institutionalize it. You need standardized learning processes built right into the workflow. Our sources point to BP's approach as a great example.
Right, BP formalized three activities to do this. The first is peer assist,
which is an expert meeting convened to advise a project manager on a key decision before they make it. It's about preventing mistakes.
Then the after-action review, a structured reflection right after a project milestone. What did we expect? What happened? What did we do differently?
And third, the retrospect, which is an in-depth case study on a completed project for maximum organization-wide learning. It's all about maximizing that knowledge flow.
Ultimately, integrating this kind of network structure requires sustained leadership commitment, often over 5 to 10 years.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. And the change program has to be aligned with clear, measurable operational objectives. We see that with Schneider Electric, for example. They didn't just implement COPs for fun. They used them to gain deeper customer application knowledge globally.
Proving that the benefits of collective intelligence contribute directly to the bottom line.
As we wrap up this deep dive, let's just reiterate the core philosophical shift of net-centric management. It fundamentally redefines the purpose of knowledge. Knowledge should not be mastered through protection, through that old restrictive belief that knowledge is power.
Instead, it has to be oriented towards those who need it, regardless of hierarchy or silo. The goal is to reduce the vulnerability of sharing.
The new mantra, replacing that industrial age fear, is clear. Knowledge shared is power squared.
The ability of your organization to learn and adapt now determines its competitive viability. KLM isn't about filing things away, it's about constantly sustaining that learning capacity.
Which brings us to a final provocative thought for you to carry forward. Think about the analogy of the spider and the child. The spider's knowledge of weaving its web is slow changing. It's like genetic code or your organization's formalized processes. It takes years, even decades, to evolve.
But the child learns much, much faster. The child can invent new traps, adapt to the environment quickly. That's like human practice and innovation within your COBs.
And technology, by making information so accessible, effectively lowers the center of gravity of the company. It gives more power, more data, and more responsibility to the operational staff, the people closest to that childlike learning and inventing.
So the hierarchy doesn't vanish. It flattens and transforms into a support function, not a command and control function. And the essential question for you, the learner, is this. Are the core processes and hierarchies in your organization hindering or enabling that essential human capacity to learn and invent new traps?
Are you forcing your agile, inventive operational staff to act like a slow-changing spider. That adaptability is where tomorrow's competitive advantage truly lies, a profound challenge to end on. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.
We'll see you next time.